The year is 2035. You're an American tourist visiting Europe. You start your morning with a croissant in Paris, take a hyperloop to Rome for lunch, and finish with a beer in Berlin. It is beautiful. The architecture is stunning. The history is palpable. But something feels off. The streets are clean but quiet. The cafes are full but mostly with grey hair. And when you try to buy a souvenir, you realise the shop isn't owned by a local. In fact, entire city blocks, the ports, and the energy grid are owned by foreign conglomerates. You aren't walking through a superpower anymore. You're walking through the world's most expensive open-air museum. Back in 2008, the economies of the European Union and the United States were roughly the same size. In fact, Europe was slightly bigger. They were economic twins. Fast forward to today, the twins have separated. While the American economy rocketed to over $27 trillion, Europe has largely stagnated, barely crawling past $17 trillion. The gap between them is now so large, it's effectively the size of the entire Japanese economy. How did a continent with the highest standard of living, the best healthcare, and the deepest history fall so far, so fast? Spoiler alert, it wasn't an accident, it was a suicide. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to dissect the 6 fatal wounds that are bleeding Europe dry. From the factories of Germany going dark, to the empty nurseries of Italy, to the regulatory stranglehold in Brussels. Welcome to the decline of the old world. If you think I'm being dramatic, just look at the numbers. Since 2008, the US economy grew by 87%, the EU just 13%. If this trend continues, the average European in 2050 will be poorer than the average resident of Mississippi. Yeah, let that sink in. So, grab your espresso, while you can still afford it, and let's look at the first nail in the coffin. 1. The Great Deindustrialization, the German engine stalls. For decades, the economic heart of Europe was Germany, and the heart of Germany was heavy industry. Cars, chemicals, machines, the stuff that makes the world turn. The formula for German success was simple, arguably brilliant and deeply cynical. Use American security to stay safe, use Chinese demand to sell cars, and, most importantly, use cheap Russian gas to power the factories. It worked, until it didn't. When the Nord Stream pipelines blew up, both literally and metaphorically, the German business model evaporated overnight. Let's talk about BASF. They are the largest chemical producer in the world. They make the stuff that goes into your toothpaste, your sneakers, your car, and your medicine. Their headquarters in Ludwigshafen is basically a city within a city. In 2024, BASF made a decision that should have terrified every politician in Berlin. They decided to shut down major production lines in Germany. Why? Because making chemicals requires massive amounts of energy. And thanks to the loss of Russian gas and a frantic botched transition to green energy, electricity prices in Germany hit levels that make doing business mathematically impossible. Instead of staying in Germany, BASF is dropping $10 billion to build a new megasite in Zhanjiang, China. Think about the irony here. Germany, a country that prides itself on human rights and environmental standards, is forcing its own companies to move to China, a country that burns coal like it's going out of style, just to stay solvent. This isn't just BASF. In December 2024, German industrial production dropped to its lowest level since the 2020 lockdowns. We are seeing the hollowing out of European industry, and here is where the dark humour kicks in. Germany shut down its last 3 nuclear power plants in April 2023. At the height of an energy crisis, they turned off clean, reliable baseload power. So, what did they do to keep the lights on? They reactivated coal plants. They are literally digging up villages to mine brown coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel in existence, to make up for the nuclear plants they shut down to save the environment. You cannot make this stuff up. But wait, I hear you say, can't they just switch to high-tech services, like the US? Well, they could, if they hadn't regulated their tech sector into a coma, which we will get to in a minute. But for now, understand this. Europe built its wealth on making things, and right now the signs on the factory doors are flipping from willkommen to closed. 2. The demographic death spiral, the empty cribs. If the factory's closing down is a heart attack, this next problem is a slow-growing cancer. It's quieter, but it's 100% fatal if untreated. Let's take a trip to Italy. Beautiful food, great wine, and absolutely no babies. In 2024, Italy's birth rate hit a historic low of 1.18 children per woman. To put that in perspective, a population needs a rate of 2.1 just to replace itself. Anything below 1.5 is considered a demographic emergency. At 1.18, you're looking at mathematical extinction. Imagine you're a 25-year-old Italian named Matteo. You just graduated. You have a degree, but you can't find a job because the economy is stagnant. See point number 1. You live with your parents because rent is insane. But here is the kicker. The Italian state expects you, Matteo, to pay for the pensions of the massive generation of retirees above you. Europe's pension systems are largely pay-as-you-go. That means there is no vault of gold where your grandma's money is stored. The money grandma gets this month comes directly out of Matteo's paycheck this month. In the 1960s, there were 4 workers for every retiree. It was easy. The burden was light. By 2050, in countries like Italy and Spain, there will be fewer than 2 workers for every retiree. Do the math. If 2 people have to pay for the full living expenses, healthcare and pension of a third person, plus their own expenses, plus the taxes to run the government, what happens? Taxes go up. Massive, crushing taxes. And when taxes go up on labour, what does Matteo do? Does he stay and pay 60% of his income to support a system that will be bankrupt by the time he retires? No. He moves. He goes to the US, or Australia, or Switzerland. This creates a death spiral. Young people leave. The tax base shrinks. The government raises taxes on the few young people remaining to cover the gap. More young people leave. We're already seeing this. In 2024, there were fewer than 370,000 births in Italy. That is the lowest number since the country was unified in 1861. And the political reality makes it worse. Who votes in Europe? Old people. If a politician says, we need to cut pensions to save the economy, they lose the election by a landslide. If a politician says, we need to bring in millions of immigrants to fix the ratio, they trigger a cultural backlash and lose the election. So they do nothing. They borrow money to pay the pensions, kicking the can down the road until the road ends. And folks, we are reaching the cliff. Interactive element. Hey, quick question for the comments. If you were Matteo, would you stay and pay the taxes, or would you leave? Let me know below. We are only 2 points in, and we've already deindustrialized Germany and depopulated Italy. But surely Europe has a plan for the future, right? Surely they are building the next Google, the next Nvidia, the next AI giant to save them? Oh, you sweet summer child. 3. The innovation vacuum, the tech graveyard. Here is a quick pop quiz. Name a European smartphone. Nokia, dead. Ericsson, dead. Okay, name a European search engine. Exactly. Now name a European social media network. If you said Mastodon, you're technically correct, but you're also a nerd and nobody invites you to parties. The harsh reality is that the modern economy is digital, and Europe, well, Europe is effectively a digital colony of the United States. Look at the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Nvidia, Meta, Tesla. The combined market capitalization of these 7 American companies is larger than the entire stock markets of the UK, France, Germany, and Italy combined. 7 companies are worth more than the industrial output of the Renaissance. Why? Is it because Europeans aren't smart? Of course not. The web was invented at CERN in Switzerland. DeepMind, the AI lab, started in London. The talent is there. The problem is that Europe has decided to become the world's regulatory superpower. There is an old joke in global business. The United States innovates. China replicates. Europe regulates. While Silicon Valley was pouring billions into artificial intelligence, the European Union was busy writing the AI Act, a massive, comprehensive set of laws to police AI before they even had a successful AI company to police. It's like writing a rulebook for a Mars colony before you've even built a rocket. Let's look at a case study. Mistral AI. Mistral is a French AI startup. They are brilliant. They are basically Europe's last hope to compete with OpenAI. But instead of spending 100% of their time training models, they have to spend huge resources navigating the labyrinth of the EU's GDPR, the Digital Markets Act, and the Digital Services Act. Imagine you are a founder. If you start a company in the US, you have immediate access to 330 million people who all speak English, use the same currency, mostly, and operate under roughly the same business laws. If you start in Europe, you might launch in France. Great. But to expand to Germany, you need to translate everything, hire German lawyers to navigate German labour laws, and deal with a completely different tax authority. Then you repeat that for Italy, Spain, Poland. It is death by 1,000 cuts. This fragmentation means European startups rarely get big enough to compete. They hit a glass ceiling. And when they finally do get big, they get bought by Americans. DeepMind, bought by Google, Skype, bought by Microsoft, Booking.com, owned by an American holding company. Europe is becoming an incubator for American corporations. They grow the talent, and then the US harvests it. And this brings us to the most depressing stat of the section. In 2008, Europe had 30% of the world's top 100 companies. Today, it has less than 14%. The future is being built in San Francisco and Shenzhen. Europe is just watching it happen on an iPhone designed in California and assembled in China. 4. The capital flight. Why money hates Europe. If you want to know the truth about an economy, don't listen to what politicians say. Watch where the money goes. Money has no patriotism. It only cares about returns. And right now, money is fleeing Europe like it's the Titanic. Let's talk about capital markets. It sounds boring, but stay with me. This is the reason why your American cousin is richer than you. Americans are obsessed with the stock market. 58% of American households own stock. In Germany, it's about 18%. Europeans keep their money in savings accounts earning 0.5% interest, or they buy real estate. Because Europeans don't invest in stocks, European companies don't have a deep pool of money to draw from when they want to grow. Let's say you have a great idea for a biotech company in Berlin. You need $100 million to build a factory. In Europe, the banks will ask for collateral. The venture capitalists will offer you $5 million and ask for 40% of your company. So what do? You go to New York. This happened with Arm Holdings. Arm is the most important company you've never heard of. They design the architecture for basically every smartphone chip on the planet. They are British, a jewel in the crown of UK tech. But when they decided to list on the stock market in 2023, did they choose the London Stock Exchange? The pride of the empire? No, they listed on the Nasdaq in New York. Even European companies don't want to be European companies anymore. Spotify is Swedish, but it trades on the New York Stock Exchange. BioNTech, who made the Pfizer vaccine, is German, trades on the Nasdaq. Birkenstock, the sandal company, is German, trades on the NYSE. This is a vicious cycle. European investors see low returns in Europe, so they invest in US funds. European companies see no money in Europe, so they move to the US. The US economy grows faster because it has all the capital. Repeat, the irony is palpable. Even the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the largest pile of cash in Europe built on oil money, invests the vast majority of its equity portfolio in the United States. Europe is effectively funding its own decline by sending its savings to America to fuel American innovation, which then sells products back to Europe. It is financial cuckoldry on a continental scale. Listen, I know this is heavy. We've got dying factories, no babies, and all the money is moving to Miami. It's a lot. If you are enjoying this cheerful breakdown of economic collapse, do me a favour and destroy that like button. Unlike the European economy, it still works. And I want to know, if you had $100,000 to invest right now, would you put it in the S&P 500, USA, or the DAX, Germany? Be honest. Put your answer in the comments. Alright, wipe the tears away. We have 2 more massive problems to cover, and the next one explains why you're heating. Bill is higher than your rent. 5. The energy suicide. Green dreams, cold reality. Energy is the master resource. It is the currency of physics. If energy is cheap, life is good. If energy is expensive, life is hard. Europe decided to play a game called Let's See How Hard We Can Make Life. For the last 20 years, Europe has led the world in the green transition, and credit where credit is due, they have reduced emissions. But the way they did it was economically catastrophic. Here is the strategy Europe chose. Shut down reliable nuclear plants, especially in Germany and Belgium. Ban fracking for natural gas, unlike the US. Build massive amounts of wind and solar. Rely on cheap Russian gas as the backup for when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. You see the flaw in the plan, right? Step 4 relied on a guy named Vladimir Putin being a nice, reliable partner. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the illusion shattered. Energy prices in Europe spiked to 10 times the average in the United States. While American factories were enjoying cheap domestic natural gas thanks to the shale revolution, European factories were paying ransom prices for LNG, liquefied natural gas, shipped in on tankers, often from the US. In 2023 and 2024, European industry paid roughly 3 to 4 times more for electricity than their competitors in the US and China. You cannot compete with that. It doesn't matter how efficient your workers are. If your electricity bill is triple your competitors', you lose. And it's not just industry, it's you. In the UK and Germany, energy poverty is a real term. People are choosing between heating and eating. The European grid is now a patchwork of instability. Because they invested so heavily in intermittent renewables, wind, solar, without building enough storage, batteries, electricity prices can go negative 1 hour when it's windy and skyrocket the next when it stops. This volatility makes it impossible for businesses to plan. Europe bet the farm on a specific vision of the future, one where the world plays by rules, trade is free, and Russia is friendly. That world is gone. But the power plants are still shut down, and while Europe de-industrializes to save the planet, China is building 2 new coal plants every week. Europe is cutting its own throat to lower global emissions by a fraction of a percent, while the rest of the world just keeps burning. 6. The geopolitical freeloader, the end of the peace dividend. Finally, we have to talk about defense, or rather, the lack of it. For 75 years, Europe has lived in a magical garden protected by an American wall. After World War II, the deal was simple. The US provides security, NATO, and Europe focuses on rebuilding and social welfare. It was a great deal for Europe. They didn't have to spend money on aircraft carriers or fighter jets. Instead, they spent that money on free healthcare, 6 weeks of paid vacation, and generous pensions. They spent their money on butter because America bought the guns. For decades, almost no NATO member met the 2% of GDP spending requirement. Germany's military became a joke. At one point, reports surfaced that soldiers were using broomsticks during exercises because they didn't have enough rifles. But now, the peace dividend is over. War has returned to the continent. And suddenly, Europe realizes it has gutted its military-industrial base. Here is a terrifying fact. In a high-intensity conflict, the British army would run out of ammo in 2 days. The German army isn't much better. Now, European governments are scrambling to rearm. But money spent on tanks is money not spent on hospitals. Money spent on artillery shells is money not spent on pensions. Europe is waking up to a harsh reality. Social democracy is expensive, but safety is even more expensive. And for the first time in 3 generations, they have to pay for both. Can they afford it? With a stagnant economy, point 1, a shrinking workforce, point 2, and no tech growth, point 3, the math simply doesn't look good. In late 2024, the European Union panicked. They asked Mario Draghi, the man who saved the euro a decade ago, to write a report on the future of European competitiveness. His conclusion? It was brutal. He basically said everything we just talked about. He warned that without radical change, Europe faces a slow agony. His words, not mine. Draghi called for massive investment, $800 billion per year, to catch up to the US and China. That is 2 Marshall Plans, every single year. But here is the tragedy. To get that money, Europe needs to unify. It needs to issue common debt. It needs to slash regulation. It needs to stop being 27 little countries in a trench coat and start acting like one superpower. And right now, the political will just isn't there. Germany doesn't want to pay for Italy's debt. France wants to protect its farmers. Hungary is doing whatever Hungary is doing. So, we are left with 2 possible futures. Future A, the Renaissance. Europe wakes up, they cut the red tape, they embrace nuclear power, they incentivize families, they create a capital market that rivals Wall Street. It will be painful, it will require sacrifice, but it saves the continent. Future B, the museum. This is the path we're on now. Europe becomes a beautiful, stagnant retirement home for the world. The rich will visit to see the Colosseum and the Eiffel Tower. They will stay in hotels owned by Americans, eat food imported from Africa, and be served by an underclass of immigrants, while the native population slowly fades away. It will be a comfortable decline. The lights won't go out all at once. The trains will just run a little slower, the hospitals will get a little more crowded, the taxes will get a little higher, until one day you look around and the party is over. There is a lesson here for everyone, regardless of where you live. Success is not permanent, wealth is not guaranteed. Europe spent 500 years conquering the world, inventing the modern economy, and building the greatest civilization in history. And in just 30 years of complacency, they threw it away. If it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. I don't want Europe to fail. I love Europe. The world needs a strong Europe, but the math doesn't care about our feelings. If you found this analysis depressing, good. That means you were paying attention. If you want to understand how the US managed to pull ahead while Europe fell behind, you need to watch our upcoming video on the American Economic Cheat Code. It explains the other side of this coin. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to survive the next recession. I'll see you in the next one.